Chatting with Kelly Quinlan of Jackets Online, previewing Georgia Tech. I want to start with Jeff Collins. I've watched a lot of his press conferences. My partner is actually a Georgia Tech alum, so he sells me on Georgia Tech whether I want to be or not. So I can't help but like the program. But so I've watched a lot of Jeff Collins's press conferences, and he seems like he's one authentic, and then two, he seems like a hell of a sales rep. And I know you were going one direction for 10 years with Paul Johnson and triple offense, and then having to go completely 180 degrees different. What's your impression of Coach Collins, and how's your read after what's been 2 seasons?
Yeah, I think, obviously it's been a little bit of a funky second year for them with COVID and everything. But the first year was tough. They made the transition. They decided to not really go the route of, say, what Auburn was doing with Gus or some of the other more run-heavy option teams like App State or whatever, going with a pistol base. They went to a full-on spread, didn't really have quarterback play for it, didn't have the offensive line to really pull that off. So that's been a slow transition. Inherited kind of a bad defensive line situation because Paul's last year, he had a bunch of seniors leave. They had a player die who was going to be an NFL draft pick, and Brandon Adams. And so the first 2 years have sort of went terribly for them in a lot of ways. They had a signee die like a few days before enrollment. Accidentally was hit by a train. Like, just the weirdest stuff you can imagine has happened to this team in Jeff's first 2 years. And then you had COVID through all of the 2020 season, and they got hit very hard. They had a game where they played with three defensive ends. That two were true freshmen, and one was a converted linebacker that weighed 205 pounds playing defensive end because he had to. So it's hard to judge anything. The records are kind of what they are. They got one more ACC win this past year. It's been a little bit of a push uphill, but Jeff's done a really nice job of assembling a really they've used the transfer portal well. I think overall, like 1 through 85, the talent is up from where it was the last few years of Coach Johnson's tenure. And I think they're now poised to be more competitive. And you saw sort of glimpses of it last year. They played some teams better. They just, had a lot of mistakes. You have a true freshman quarterback too. That's hard. They were true freshmen, at right tackle, quarterback, and the tailback. And then your center was a guy playing center for the first time that was a sophomore. So that's not a recipe for great success last year, but now those guys have those cumulative reps, and that should be different. And the defense should be better because that's Jeff's specialty. And if it's not, that's kind of going to be the thing he's got to hang his hat on, right? If you're a defensive coach, the defense has to be good.
You just mentioned a couple of things. One, I personally love how he saves jersey numbers 0 through 9 for the quote unquote best players or most earned numbers of the uniform cycle. And then two, I like how he pulled the trigger from game one go forward and just said, Jeff Sims, you're my guy. We're going forward with you. Learn on the field.
So yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the numbers thing. Yeah. So they go from 0 to 9, and they do duplicates. So there can be guys on both sides of the ball, but yeah, they're all earned. You have to re-earn them every single year. Like, it's not guaranteed that you will keep your single digit, and they make a big deal out of it within the program. It's a sign of leadership, and they have some younger players that have earned them as well. So, Jameer Gibbs, who was their star running back last year, he got one this spring, and they've had a couple other young guys pick them up. So, that's been a kind of cool thing to see how he uses that. He doesn't like to talk about it too much, but it's been an important part of the program. On to talking about Jeff. It was interesting. Jeff Sims came into spring of 2020. Georgia Tech got 6 practices in before everything shut down. And Jeff was the 4th quarterback in the spring. He had come in, and they flipped him from Florida State very, very close to the end. They had another true freshman quarterback named Tucker Gleason who was ahead of him. They had 2 other quarterbacks on the roster who were higher up in the pecking order, and James Graham and Jordan Yates. And Jeff Sims used that COVID break that they had where they were away from the program to learn the playbook. He came back, won the job outright in August, jumped all 3 of those guys, and has never really looked back. And it's been impressive. He had 3 games or sort of train wrecks that threw off his turnover numbers. But if you look at the rest of the season, once he kind of got that together, he, was pretty average in terms of turnovers and fumbles and those things. And, he led the nation in fumbles last year, which is a tough stat. But he's a kid with tremendous talent. The players love him. And it's sort of that growing pain will help a lot because he was a true freshman playing in the ACC, and they didn't even play an FCS team. Their one non-conference game last year was Central Florida, so he caught no breaks and opened at Florida State, the school he was committed to forever, and won the first game of the season. So Jeff's shown himself to be a really good competitor. He kind of learned on the go last year. Now it's going to be really interesting to see where he takes that next jump in year 2.
On the defensive side of the ball, can you go into who's going to be the leader of the group? Is it going to be Quez Jackson?
It's kind of interesting because the strength of defense last year was supposed to be the secondary, and they had the entire group back basically, and they struggled a lot. And corners played pretty well, but the rest of the secondary didn't look good. Linebacker position, I think Quez gets to play. He played out of position the last couple of years, played more will. He's going to move back to the Mike linebacker where he's a little more comfortable. They have a kid named Ace Ely they picked up from Maryland. Charlie Thomas, who was playing safety last year. And those two guys are kind of erasers in terms of they can run sideline to sideline. Quez can kind of hang in the box and do the things. But I think the biggest thing for that defense this year is the defensive line's just markedly improved. They really run 3 deep at both end positions with guys who could play. Probably 4 deep when they get Keon White on campus, the transfer from Old Dominion. They are getting better defensive tackle. That's always going to be a challenge at Georgia Tech. It's just hard for them to get the same level of defensive tackles that a Clemson or a Georgia gets. It's been a struggle forever at Georgia Tech. You have to develop those guys. So they're trying to do that. And I think the defense on paper looks a lot better. It looks like what Jeff Collins would like, a defense that can get after the quarterback and be aggressive and make plays. They did show some signs of creating turnovers and sort of creating that chaos. And I think as the offense, one of the things I'm a big believer in, and I've seen this a lot in my career covering different teams, is like if your offense is competent and your defense has faith in them to score and move the ball and possess the ball, the defense will play better. And I think last year that was a struggle because of the turnovers, and the defense lost confidence that way too.
And taking a look at your schedule, trying to figure out what is realistic, a next step progression, your schedule, it's not friendly. At Clemson, at Miami, Florida, at Notre Dame, and then you also host Georgia and North Carolina. What do you feel is the next step progression for this club?
I think, going to a bowl game this year would be a huge step forward. There are 6 games, I would say, that are very winnable when you look at their schedule. So they need to hit on those or create an upset somewhere. And then the next step is competing in the Coastal, because quite frankly, it's sort of North Carolina and Miami, but they're not Clemson, right? Like they're not Georgia, they're not even Notre Dame. Like those are programs that have kind of underachieved relative to their talent a little bit. North Carolina struggles just they don't have a defense and haven't had one since probably Butch Davis. But if you look at it, getting back into that Coastal competition, that was one thing that Paul Johnson did a great job of. They won their games in the league, and sometimes they would lose some non-conference games and struggle a little bit there, but they were always in the hunt in the Coastal. And that's what Jeff Collins got to get back to. The Coastal's not that difficult. You can't be in the bottom half of that every year. Like that's just not an acceptable position. He will tell you that. And I think he thinks that's their next sort of big waypoint here is, trying to finish in the top 2, 3 in the Coastal, upsetting a couple of teams. And let's be real here too. Miami's a huge question mark because it's all about De'Aaron King. If he's healthy, and then they have an offense that's pretty interesting, but they've lost a lot of pieces. North Carolina lost a lot of pieces on offense, but they have Sam Howell back. So it's like, you got to see kind of where they're at. To me, when I look at the Coastal, it's pretty wide open. So, the schedule is hard. Having Clemson and even Boston College coming to Atlanta is tough. Playing at Clemson's very tough. I saw a stat today that was circulated that the most wins against Clemson in the Dabo Swinney era are by Florida State, South Carolina, and Georgia Tech. They each have beat him 5 times. And then no one else has more than 2. So that's kind of a fascinating little stat there too. But to me, it's just, you got to get in that competition, right? You can't be bottom dwellers. You don't want to turn into Duke in the 90s and early 2000s, like, so I think that's the big thing here for Coach Collins is if he wins, his recruiting will continue to improve because they do a great job of being a salesman and selling the program and selling his vision, which people like and I think is really interesting. I think the thing there is he's got to kick it to that next level.
All sounds good. Kelly, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, man.